Let's go with the Enlightenment today. The Enlightenment. What? It is the age of applying reason to the human and natural worlds. It is a response to absolute monarchs, and it's fueled by democratic revolutions and religious tolerance. So this is just before we have the American Revolution and the French Revolution, which are two major factors in all the other revolutions that are going to come up. Enlightenment literally means a light bulb going off. There's scientific revolution started. They're starting to think more about the way we think and how we process information and how you get information and like scientific theory and stuff. And they're like, hey, if science is this all powerful thing, then maybe God isn't as powerful as we thought he was. So, like, what are morals? What is wrong or right? Who does have the right to rule us if it doesn't come from God? So it's inspired by the scientific revolution, the Protestant Reformation, and this questioning of religion and absolute monarchs who are taking their power too far without being able to back up. Like, if you have such a divine right to rule, why are your people starving in the streets? Why are we constantly fighting wars over land? So a mix of all of those things leads to enlightenment or thinking for yourself. This is a movement of the wealthy. I need you to know that. As we're looking at this man with his fancy hair, fancy suit, nice buttons, lace at his neck. Like, this is a movement for the wealthy, not for everybody else. It has hardly any effect on everyday average people because they're not wealthy. Now we get to Voltaire. He's a French writer on freedom of speech, religious tolerance, and separation of church and state. He is very much against an absolute monarch. So I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. So this comes back to the idea that people aren't allowed to question the king and they can't say anything against him, specifically in France. So I remember Louis XIV stated, I am the state. What I think and what my opinions are is what the opinions of France are. So if you didn't go with his opinion, then you were wrong and probably thrown in jail. Voltaire's like, hey, that's not cool. You can't throw people in jail for that. So freedom of speech, thank you. We get that from him. It's funny to think that that's not a normal thing in countries or in thought processes. Like, why wouldn't people have freedom of speech? But for a long time, it wasn't, because absolute monarchy and the intolerance of the Pope. John Locke is our next one, who has nice locks, but not so much a nice face. Yeah, so he's the English writer of 2 treatises on government. Shockingly, they're about the government. And he tells them that people are the source of power, not God, not your divine right of birth, not because you're born into a specific family and you're born to rule. He says people. People give you power. We choose to give you power, and your job with that trust is to protect our rights. So this is the first time we've talked about natural rights, like life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. All people have the natural rights, including life, liberty, and property. We've changed it a little bit in our own Declaration of Independence, but that's the basic form of where we got our ideas from in America. Once again, Enlightenment inspired our revolution. So this is the typical agreement, and it goes way back. He just voices it. This is the agreement that we've had since the inception of people living outside of tribes and forming actual societies, is that nobody gives up their power for free. Like, I want to do whatever I want to do, and I should be able to do whatever I want to do, and I don't have to answer to anybody. And that is so okay until that conflicts with somebody else's right to do all those things. So it's okay if I steal to protect my family because we're hungry. It's not okay if you steal from my family to feed your family. It's okay if you kill someone else's brother because they hit you in the face. It is not okay if you do that to my brother. Like, everything is okay until it happens to me. And because we're selfish creatures like that, we need to have some type of government, but that government is supposed to protect our rights. Like you're saying, hey, if it's not okay for him to kill someone, it's not okay for this person to do that either. So there's an equality to this and a fairness. So the government should have equality and fairness to protect the rights of these people, like life, liberty, and property. And at his point, with especially in England, like the government's not doing this. If a lord kills somebody, they may get fined 100 gold, maybe 10 gold, maybe nothing, depending on who they kill. No one cares if they kill a beggar on the street. But if a worker kills another worker, suddenly they're also now being killed. It's not a fair or equal sense of justice. So Locke is really focusing on people are the source of power and natural rights that the government is supposed to protect. Montesquieu is our next philosopher, and he's French again. Nice fluffy wig, clean shirt. he writes the spirit of laws. So he's also focused on the separation of power. To become truly great, one has to stand with people, not above them. So the idea that the government is of the people and with the people, not above them like the church is currently being. So if you remember from the previous chapter, France is Catholic and they are persecuting any of the Protestants so far as to kick them out of the country or torture them if they refuse to leave. And a lot of the king's authority is coming from the idea of this divine right to rule, and the Catholic Church is supporting it. So that I'm above you and I don't have to deal with your problems, I guess. Like, I'm above you and you are not important, you're insignificant, you're just here to do my bidding. He claims that that is because of the way that the church has taught people, and that's unacceptable. So separate the church from the state, and suddenly you would have a government that supports the people, not themselves. Thomas Hobbes, another English writer, he writes Leviathan, and people are naturally wicked. He takes a pretty depressing look on this. People are naturally wicked, and the government must keep order because we're naturally bad. So without government, our lives would be nasty, brutish, and short. So he goes with the same idea that people need a government, but he doesn't say it's because we have natural rights. He says it's because we're naturally evil. So he might agree with Thomas Locke on some things, but definitely not on why the government keeps order. Yeah, that's very like Machiavellian. Machiavellian's the prince. Like, people are naturally horrible. You need to keep them in line. To keep them in line, you have to like basically just be more feared than loved. So you can be wicked as long as they obey you. Yeah, not the best outlook on life, but still more supportive of an absolute monarchy. So he's much more into like, hey, I understand where y'all are coming from, but we're bad, so we need this absolute monarch. So he's on the complete flip side of this. The Enlightenment wasn't pure anti-monarchy. It's very important to understand that, but they were very much, why do we need it, or why do we not need it? So they're looking at what's needed and why do you need these things and how do you need these things and why do we come up with these things in the first place. It's all philosophy, all thinking, and it goes both ways with for and against the monarchy. Last one for the government philosophers is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, another French writer. He wrote The Social Contract. I think he's probably my favorite. Government is an agreement or contract between ruler and people. He would agree with Locke still, this idea of a social construct. The government gives you what you need, you give them your support. No man has any natural authority over his fellow men. Like, you can take what is given to you, but you can't take it if it's not given to you. So it's kind of, I think he would go with a like classroom teacher aspect. Everybody's been in a classroom where the teacher's young or dumb or just wants to yell and scream, and you have to demand their respect, and they don't give you a chance to even try to defend yourself. And those classrooms are generally where the teacher leaves in tears because you can't demand respect. You can't demand something that nobody's going to give you because you don't give it in return. So it's a contract. Just like most of the time, you enjoy your classes where the teacher treats you like a person and you agree to listen to what they say and they agree to treat you like a competent individual who doesn't need someone to hold their hand. It's a good balance of power, and it's a good social contract. We have lots of these in the world. It's kind of a cool thing the more you study him, but yeah. Mary Wollstonecraft is one of our last people, and yay, we finally got a female in history. Whoop, whoop. English advocate for women's rights. She's writing A Vindication of Rights of Women and strengthen the female mind by enlarging it, and there will be an end of blind obedience. Yeah, she was a big advocate for educating your women, and basically it went down to like, hey, if I'm wrong, then it won't work, and if I'm right, then you have more smart people in the world. There's really no losing here. But it would end blind obedience, so maybe that would be a loss for some of the men of the time who just expected their wife to sit pretty and have babies. Well, I don't know, but I do very much like her. She was a pretty prolific writer of the time, which is very odd. These people are definitely the exception that had this broad education that they could start thinking like this, especially that she's a woman and she could read and write and have a lot of discourse. So pretty awesome at the time. The results. There are revolutions in France, Haiti, and America because of these people and their ideas, and they're pushing against a monarchy and pushing against the idea that somebody has absolute authority because God gave it to them. Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights have a ton of quotes from these people and are heavily influenced by their ideas. So to understand the revolutions, you have to understand the Enlightenment and the idea that this didn't just come out of nowhere. Once again, 7 Years' War is going to play a part in it, and the Enlightenment plays a part in inspiring people and giving them more options. Just like the Protestant Reformation allowed absolute monarchy to take over, now the Enlightenment is going to be the end to absolute monarchy because people can think for themselves.